Next on Garden Line, how to collect a sample from the lawn and garden.
So what we recommend is to take a sample right along the margin.
And a McCrory Garden Party preview.
This program is funded in part by Swiftel Communications.
Welcome to Garden Line. I'm Stephen Monk. Tonight on our show, we'll visit with an extension expert who will demonstrate how to collect a quality sample to be submitted to the plant diagnostic lab. And during our Garden of the Week feature, extension horticulturalist Dave Graper gives a preview of this Friday's McCrory Gardens Party. And as always, our panel of lawn and garden experts will answer your questions, and so get ready to call in. The panelists are here with the most up-to-date information about gardening, lawn care, insects, trees, and a host of other lawn and garden concerns. Joining me in the studio to answer your questions are John Keykafer, Brookings County Extension Educator, Rhoda Burrows, Extension Horticulturalist, Mike McNean, Extension Weed Specialist, and John Ball, Extension Forestry Specialist. The phone number for you to call in for your lawn and garden questions is 1-866-595-SDSU. Again, that is 1-866-595-7378. Helping to answer the phones tonight are the Brookings County Master Gardeners. And remember, when you're calling in with your question, please provide your phone volunteers with as much information as possible about your garden problem. Be ready to provide a description of the problem, when the problem first appeared, whether it's affecting any other surrounding plants, and moisture and soil conditions that may exist around the plant where the problem is showing up. Now, before we get to your questions, we have some important and timely information for you. Garden Line went on location with Extension plant pathologist Larry Osborne to learn just how to collect samples to submit to SDSU's plant diagnostic lab. Larry explains what the clinic staff need for samples gathered from either the lawn or the garden to provide an accurate diagnosis.
I'm Larry Osborne with SDSU Extension Plant Pathology. I want to talk today a little bit about taking samples to send in to experts at your county office or to our plant diagnostic clinic. Every day we work with a lot of things from trees to grass to garden vegetables, and sometimes those samples come to us in a condition that don't let us really do much with them. So I wanted to show you how to take a proper sample when we're out in the garden or in the landscape so that expert has something to work with in helping you solve your problems. The best thing to do is to take a good overview of where your problem area is. Take a look at what plants are affected. In this case, we're looking at turf that's got some sort of problem. There's some dead and dying patches in this turf, and we want to take a sample. Now, we could go into the center of this dead area and take that sample with this is a golf cup cutter, but you can also use a knife or a small trowel. But we want to take a few inches of root tissue to send in so that the diagnostician has a good idea of what's going on below ground. We could take this sample, but really all we're seeing is dead tissue. We could also take nearby in the healthy tissue and in the healthy part of the lawn, but really there's not a lot of symptoms going on in that area. So what we recommend is to take a sample right along the margin. And of course we're using our cup cutter here to get a nice uniform sample. We want to go down a couple of inches in order to get plenty of root tissue. So we've taken our sample, and you see we have all of the root zone of that grass, as well as the thatch layer, and both some healthy and diseased turf. The diagnostician is going to be able to use this sample to hopefully find out what is killing the turf in these small patches, and maybe we find some fungi and things in there. But it's also important to see how thick is that thatch layer and how healthy those roots are. In this bed, we see both some live and some dead penstemon plants. Oftentimes we'll get a sample of just say a dead plant. For example, this specimen right here is dead from top to bottom. And a lot of times a homeowner or a gardener will collect that sample and they'll correctly put that in a nice plastic bag, zipper style bag, with a dry paper towel. Now it's okay to bend these things over if you need to fit into the bag. That's generally a good sample. But one problem with this is the tissue is completely gone. It's really hard to tell what killed this plant in many cases just from this sample. Maybe what could be a little bit better is if we're able to find either a plant or something nearby that's in the process of dying. This plant is both has some healthy tissue and some diseased tissue, and you see that it's not completely gone. That's a little more informative to the plant disease diagnostician. Maybe dig that plant up, roots and all, and wrap those roots in a paper towel and put those in the plastic bag and get that to your county office or to the diagnostic lab.
All right, well, we want to thank Larry for that helpful information, because there's a number of times on Garden Line where we ask you to send some samples in either to the university or to your local extension office, and it really helps to follow those directions. So, well, now this part of the show, as every show, we do our round table. So, John, what do you have as key caper? What do you have for us for the insect world this week?
Well, I brought a picture of a cricket in for tonight. Not only in Brookings, but all over the state right now. Get a lot of reports of people just being inundated with crickets. And these are the crickets that they're finding all over. These are a little smaller than the average crickets that we see. You know, they're not the big black shiny ones that we find in houses quite so much. But people are finding these on walls of buildings, outside under lights. They find them piled up in corners of buildings and things like that, in the mornings especially. And we do see them occasionally getting into some buildings as well. We do find them in gardens and in some ag crops as well. These are actually a different genus than the ones that we do find in the homes. They're a little different. These are commonly called ground crickets instead of field crickets. Common names are a little bit misleading. These things will get up off the ground, sit on walls and things too. And the field crickets are on the ground too. So, you know, the common names don't necessarily mean where you're finding them or where you're likely to find them. People then ask, well, what do we do about them? I have huge numbers of them around the house, and they're usually on the outside of the house. We aren't finding very many of them inside buildings. Trick there, like with a lot of these things, is to try to seal up any of those entry points. You know, they're not coming in deliberately, they're just coming in when they see an opportunity. So you want to make sure the door sweeps under the doors are intact and in good shape. If that's the case, then they can't get in underneath the doors. You want to make sure any cracks are sealed up, just general prevention like that. Beyond that, you know, one of the best tips is maybe turn some of those lights off at night. They're strongly attracted to lights, and that's why we end up finding them around those buildings. In gardens, it's a little more difficult. They're pretty mobile. You spray, they'll be back in a day or so, or actually it's not the same ones, but it's others that move in when the first batch dies off. Pretty difficult to try to get them out of there, and it may come down to simply trying to screen them away from certain plants if they're showing a real strong preference for those plants.
Okay. Barrier spray?
Barrier sprays work well around buildings as well. Not as great around gardens, just because they tend to be able to cross over it fairly easily. They fly over things, and very strong flyers, really.
Okay. Thanks, John. Rhoda, what's in the general horticulture area?
We're going to talk about a couple different things tonight. One is with our lawn grasses. If you're thinking of redoing your lawn, fall is a good time to do that. And right about now is when you want to start. If you're taking out your old one, if you want to use Roundup first, the first spray of Roundup should probably go down pretty quick, because you want to leave it a couple weeks and maybe even reapply it, and then be ready to seed at about the second week of September or so. So start thinking ahead if you're going to be doing that. If you're just maintaining your lawn, as we get into some of the warmer temperatures, and most of the state hasn't had to worry too much about drought, but you know, we've had it so wet this year that our roots aren't very deep. And so lawns are drying out in a hurry, and our gardens too. I've heard a couple people that didn't realize that their gardens were drying out. Well, the roots just haven't had a chance to go deep. So keep an eye on that, and water deeply when you can, and help those roots go down. But the other thing that we can do is raise the mower. You don't want to set, for our northern grasses, we don't want any 1-inch mowing. We want 2.5, 3, even 3.5 inches is a good height, and that allows the roots to go down too. We also prefer to have the clippings lie rather than collect them, as long as they're not shading, you know, big clumps on your grass. It's actually much healthier for your lawn if you leave the clippings, and they don't form the thatch, but they'll help fertilize and add organic matter to lawn over time, and that will make it more drought tolerant as well.
Okay, good. Now, if they want more details on seeding a new lawn, is there a publication they could pick up at the local extension office? Or?
Yeah, and I'm not thinking of the name just right offhand, but check with your county office, and we can help you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Mike, what do we have in the weed world?
Well, things are kind of quieting down, but there is a weed that's starting to flower out there that's catching people's eyes because it's growing all over the trees, and that weed is wild cucumber. Wild cucumber likes a more moist soil, so now this year in a lot of areas in South Dakota we've had wetter conditions, and that's going to allow this wild cucumber to thrive. Now you can see here this wild cucumber just completely engulfed this small dead tree and just kind of took it over. So it catches your eye, and this looks like a horrible weed, but it's just an annual weed. It's not a perennial. So after this year, it's going to be gone. Now you might get seedlings coming up again, but it's just a one-year thing. So be watching for it. Now is the time when we start to see that white flower on top. We kind of have a star-shaped leaf to it. And then barely down below, well, in the next photograph, we'll see a better picture of this unique fruit that it gets. It's a, it's a wild cucumber. It's a very thorny fruit. Doesn't taste at all like cucumber, so don't try that. It's a horrible tasting fruit, but very unique. So wild cucumber. So I guess we might have one more picture of, so if you see this, not a lot of good control options. And people see this and they get concerned. It's an annual, so just mowing around the base, clipping off the base of the plant will kill it. If you wanted to control it before it got onto the tree, like early summer, maybe next year, be watching for it, and maybe you could mow, or there's some herbicides, that sort of thing, you could use early on. But timing is critical there. So unfortunately, no good control options, but on the upside, it's not going to be highly invasive, so it's not something you need to get too concerned about.
All right. John, kind of a follow-up with that particular weed, as Mike mentioned, a lot of times the tree will die out. Is that more of just taking away all the sunshine so it's unable to produce food, or what causes the tree or shrub to be?
Oh, it's just a wimpy tree or shrub. I mean, okay. It's usually they grow on dead stuff.
Yeah, mostly
because if it's a live tree, it'll beat it up.
It will.
Yeah, it's just looking for something to hang on to. And since it's an annual, it's not anything that I even really worry about. Grape can be a problem. Poison ivy can be a problem. Wild cucumber, no.
Isn't. Okay.
It just catches people's eye, and then they get concerned, but it's not a weed to get too concerned about.
No, it can look a little like kudzu when it starts.
Yeah,
I mean, you just start filling, but no, it's really not a problem.
It doesn't really move. Okay. But I assume you have something else to share with us besides the question I just asked.
Yeah, actually I do, but I have to say I like Rhoda's idea on the mowing height, 3.5 inches. How about half a foot or so? That way we can just go fishing. But the people that watch Garden Line are pretty good, and the last couple of times they've made fun of the panelists. I mean, who would figure? Because we couldn't identify some annuals and perennials, which, okay, fine. And so we're going to turn the tables. And tonight I'm going to ask you folks to figure out how to identify a shrub. So I'm going to put a couple slides up here of a shrub. There it is. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. You got to figure it out. At the end of the show, we're going to tell you this one. But this shrub grows throughout the entire state. So you folks up in Bison and Buffalo can't whine that we're giving you something that can't grow there. This one can. So we can find it throughout the state. That's a fairly large specimen, about 6 feet, growing up in the north central part of the state, in fact. The next picture that will be coming up here is going to show the flowers. It's one of the earliest flowering shrubs we have. This thing will kick in mid-April in Brookings, and then right now, if you have one, you'll find that it's covered with the small, bright red drupes. And so for all you folks say, well, gee, you know, let's do a woody plant, here it is. So all our viewers, let's see if you can figure it out, and end of the show, we'll give you the answer.
All right, quiz time.
That's quiz time.
All right.
No prizes, but a quiz time.
Okay. Well, let's get right into our questions for this evening. And the first one that I have here is an individual, Chamberlain. They were staying at a friend's house, and the rabbits are eating everything. Is there anything they can do here, they say, to get rid of the rabbits? But any thoughts there as far as protection or rabbit repellents that you would recommend or suggest?
Well,
and they say everything, so they don't say just flowers or trees. There
is that 22.
Yeah.
That's just they want to get rid of the. Now, I'll start out with saying one thing, and then John, you can jump in there. Don't trap them. Nobody else wants them either. You know, people say, well, I'm going to do the nice thing. I'm going to pick them up and trap them and take them somewhere else. I mean, maybe give them to a biker as they're leaving the state. But really, it's actually crueler. If we had one of the wildlife people here say, I mean, when you put it in a new habitat, it's not going to live anyway. So you're better off doing a good, clean kill rather than saying, well, I'm going to do the nice thing and turn it out in the country like somebody else wants it there. But in terms of repellent, deer away is about the only thing I know that's a spray that works. It smells like rotten eggs. But John, can you think of anything else? Other than fencing, of course.
Yeah, you know, there are some kind of folk remedies that people come up with. Bone meal, blood meal, both of them have some issues with those. People try red pepper and report some success with it. I think honestly the only other option maybe is fencing, and that's really what's going to work best for keeping all of those rabbits away from some of those plants or shrubs, trees. Otherwise, it comes down to location, and if you have opportunity to find lethal methods, I guess that's maybe your best bet of doing it.
Pet coyote.
Yeah, good rabbit dog, something like that.
Terrier does well.
Yeah.
Okay. This question is from Platt. Grapes. Grapes that turn black on the bottom, encompasses the whole grape, slowly but surely. Began about a month ago. The leaves appear to have traces of rust sporadic throughout them. The grapes turn hard and black and are not edible. Rhoda, is that yours?
Yep.
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of black rot on grapes this year, and that's a pretty good description of what happens. They shrivel up. They don't rot has a big berry, but they shrivel up and turn dark. And it's a fungus. And you need to start spraying just about bloom time, and then for about 3 or 4 weeks after, Cap 10 will have some activity on it at least. But the other thing you really need to do is take any of those old shriveled berries and right now get them off the plant, because that's the inoculum for next year. So again, once the leaves have come off, if you've missed any of the berries, take those off, get them away from the plant. And it'd be a good idea, if you can, to rake up the leaves as well and get them off the plant, because that's where most of the inoculum for next year's infection will come from.
All right. From Vermilion, John Ball. Planted 2 dogwoods a couple months ago. Some of the leaves have turned red and look burned. They were planted with manure fertilizer. Is this causing the burned leaves? They seem to be improving with daily watering.
Well, you know, the daily watering is going to help them regardless. I mean, unless it's incredibly wet, of course. But dogwoods are kind of an interesting plant. They do like moist soils. In fact, if you plant them on the south side of a building and it dries out, they often fail. So a newly planted plant, it could be overwatered, as Rhoda's mentioned. It may not be developing much of a root system. We even see that with some newly planted shrubs, or it just could be the fact that it's getting established and needs a little bit more water. Having some leaves turning red prematurely right now, discoloring, to me is not a real concern. But the biggest thing is it's on the south side of your house where it's picking up that sun. My guess is you need to add a little bit more water to it right now.
All right. So the manure is probably not really a factor in that.
Well,
fertilizer,
it's hard to tell how much. I mean, really, the first year, though, don't fertilize anything, any of your trees or shrubs. They don't need it. They're not going to benefit from it. So I would say it's not helping things. Potentially, if they added a lot, it could be harmful, but right. I doubt it.
Okay. John Kike, what are all the yellow and white moths on my garden plants? They don't appear to be eating the leaves. Any way to get rid of them or be concerned about them? And that is from Volga.
Yeah, this is kind of a fun one because people call in a lot with this sort of question. These aren't actually moths that you're dealing with in most of these cases. They're butterflies. Difference is kind of minor in a way, but the white ones are the standard imported cabbage worm or cabbage white butterfly. The yellow ones are an alfalfa clover worm or alfalfa sulfur. They feed on a wide range of legumes. They don't stick just with alfalfa. You find them in soybeans and crops as well, and you'll find them on peas and beans in the garden sometimes. They're a green caterpillar. The white cabbage butterflies have a green caterpillar that you find on those cabbage plants, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage itself, and they just get all over. The yellow ones are really common this year. It seems like we had a good year for them.
Okay. Would these be the ones that are flying at night? The other night I came home, it was almost like I was driving into snow flurries.
Right, yeah, these aren't the ones that are going to fly at night, and you will see them flying only during the day. We've got a number of other moths that are out flying at night, but most of those are a darker, kind of a gray or tan color.
All right. Rhoda, asparagus. When should I dig and transplant asparagus? When should I cut it back? And when to fertilize? And what is the best formula of fertilizer to use when you do fertilize?
Well, the best formula is what you use after you take a soil test and find out what's in your soil. They can use a fair amount of nitrogen. As far as planting them, generally we plant in the spring. As if you're talking about moving a mature plant, just be aware that roots can go down 6 or 8 feet. So you're only going to be able to get a small part of the plant if you do that. My preference is just to go with a new plant, then you know that you're not bringing along any disease issues that might have been starting in the old bed. As far as turning it back, you want to wait till the fall frost, until the fern's completely yellow. You can either leave it over the winter if you don't have any rust on it or other diseases, and that helps catch the snow, or you can just cut it back in the fall. Either way is fine.
Okay. And Rhoda, while I have you on deck here, I'm going to go back to the individual that called about the moths that John answered. And the second question they had there is, how do you store leeks?
Well, they're cool season, so they should be stored cool and dry in the refrigerator. I have not kept leeks before, so I can't say how long they will store, but kind of like a green onion.
Yeah, I know they can store a fair amount of time, but that's for a cellar, like cool, not cold, but cool.
Yeah.
The trick, you can put them in your basement, but our basements are usually too humid right now. But cool and dry, and just put them up on racks. Usually.
All right. Well, as we typically see throughout the week, we do receive samples, either email or in the mail, to talk about. And tonight's on graphic number 1 deals with some strawberries that came in from Crook, South Dakota. My raspberries develop white spots as they ripen, and as shown in the photo here. Not all berries get this, but the problem gets worse every day. This is an autumn bliss planted spring of 2009. Is this a fungus? In addition to getting drier weather, can I use a fungicide to control the problem? Any ideas on that, John or Rhoda?
From the picture, if it's just kind of turning white and not rotting, it might be an insect that does that. And it's a toxin from the sting of the insect that does that. If it's actually fuzzy white, then you've probably got botrytis mold, which I'd expect to see a lot of this year with our weather. So
and that's what I was thinking, Rhoda, because unfortunately I have that in my own raspberries. It was such a wet year. We're getting it with a lot of botrytis. I mean, there are some insects, but when I looked at that, it almost looked like some of my own plantings. Between that and anthracnose, which was a real problem this year, I mean, it cut my production down to nothing on some of my summer bearings. So that's what I was thinking, the botrytis.
All right.
And again, sanitation. As soon as these berries as soon as you quit picking them, go ahead and cut those old canes out and get rid of them. Bring them out of the patch, and that'll open up the patch to air movement, so you'll get a little bit less carryover till next year.
Actually, with those autumn bliss, which is what they had,
Yeah,
you know, just
that's
cut
true.
the entire thing to the ground. You know, because most of us, we only want the fall crop anyway, and mine look a little like theirs, so I'm still getting some production out of it. But yeah, cut them to the ground, haul everything away, the fallen leaves. For the anthracnose, I was going to spray with lime sulfur in the spring, and I don't know for botrytis if that does anything, but it's actually a pretty good idea for raspberries. It won't hurt. Yeah.
To do that. And that's after the first killing frost. They can do that?
Well, to cut them back?
Yes.
Well, they'll still be fruiting up to the first killing frost on them bliss. You know, if they're just getting a little, I'd say keep them, and you're starting to get the fruit. But right afterwards, cut it down, but make sure you get rid of all the fallen leaves and that too. Rake it out, clean it up so it's only this tall, and then in the spring spray it with lime sulfur just as it's starting to break.
All right. The second graphic that we have comes from Yankton, and this is, we are interested to know anything about this flower. If you recognize it, could you help me out as far as what we have here? There's a graphic 2 and 3. Yep. Yep.
This, I understand, was on last week, and a number of viewers wrote in, and it was sort of amusing. There's about 6 different common names for this that are commonly used. Anything from surprise lily to magic lily to resurrection lily to naked lady. But the interesting thing about this particular plant, Lycoris flamigera, is that the foliage comes up in the spring and then dies down, and then you don't see anything, and all of a sudden the flowers come up. So that's the surprise part, or the resurrection part.
We have one of those at our place, and it's really kind of a fascinating plant to see that. So, the next one we have, graphic number 4, comes to us from Rapid City, and John Ball. This one I think we'll have you answer. I have a 25-foot ash tree that is being attacked by an insect. Could you please identify and tell me how, when, and with what to control this insect with? They also really appreciate the program and appreciate your insights.
All right. Well, this is an easy one then. That's a good one. This is actually ash bark beetle. And it's a very small insect. The eggs are laid and they all tunnel through, and they emerge at about the same point. It almost looks like they all went out there and held little tarsal segments and flew out at the same time, because literally the holes will encircle the twig. Now, this is not the problem. This is an indication of a problem. And so this is not something we typically spray for, but it's telling you your tree is beginning to decline. And why it's declining, I can't tell you. I mean, all we're seeing is about 2.5 inches of it. But it may be soil conditions, which is one of our bigger ones. It could be the fact you had a real tough winter last year. In fact, there's an awful lot of dieback and ash out there anyway. And now these little ash bark beetles are taking advantage of that. So they're not a problem. I mean, there's nothing to spray for anyway with them. But they're telling you something else is going on with your tree, and it's vulnerable to attack. So.
Okay. Willow Lake, apple trees, 25 to 30 years old. Branches are randomly dying. The bark is peeling off the trunk and around some of the branches. They don't really know what the variety is. They really don't see any particular evidence of insect on the tree or disease. Or if a disease, what should they spray?
Well, I don't know, Rhoda. I mean, to me, dead branches, black rot or fire blight is what it comes down to. And boy, the control would be different. Other than about the only thing I could say is prune out the dead and dying branches and disinfect your tools between cuts. And
we do have an extension handout on fire blight, so you can contact your county office or download it from the internet as well. And I got a lot of questions at Dakota Fest today on dying apple branches. So apparently this is the year for things to...
You're right, it is. But I've seen a fair amount of, and the fruit I showed you before the show here, I mean black rot, which is on the branches too. And so I'm always cautious when someone calls up and says, well, that's fire blight, because there is more than that. Than fire blight. I've seen that miss. But you're right, there is a lot of fire blight, particularly West River I've seen just...
Well, and some of what we look at is whether the leaves turn brown and stay on on the limb or whether the leaves turned yellow and fell off, in which case I often suspect it may be our wet soils as well this year.
Well, yeah, we have that. The other thing that I've seen is that we're having a real problem with cedar apple rust, but some of the leaves are just turning yellow and they have these small lesions, almost a defensive reaction of the plant. So you're right, there's an awful lot going on, and with that, you know, they say, well, we have some dying branches. That's really hard to tell.
This particular one, they're saying in certain spots the bark is also starting to curl and peel away.
Well,
if that would be advanced.
No, that could be the tree. I mean, you know, there's two trees that bark curls and peels off that people call and are alarmed about. One is an apple, the other is a silver maple. And it's just natural. I mean, we've got crab apples and apples around here that the bark peels almost like a little U, and it's completely normal. So that in itself is not a cause for alarm. It's in fact they're having branch dieback. And I think Rhoda hit it right. If the leaves are blackened and hanging from there, and maybe a little crook at the tip, well, that's kind of more towards the fire blight end.
All right.
More information.
A couple different things, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. John, we have a couple samples here with us tonight, and this question comes in from Brookings. Question number 1, hackberry, holes. What are the holes? And it would be over here.
Yep. Well, you can see they already made a mistake here. I mean, you know, what did Larry say? You got to bring in the whole plant right down to the roots. I've just got a small sample here. Hold that for me. I don't know where it's going. But, well, we had a sample here somewhere. There it is. Got to bring it up. There we go. Put it in front of me. There we go. I like that. What we're looking at here is a hackberry, and there's two things going on with it. First of all, the little yellow mottling in there, that's island mosaic. It's a viral disease that we don't know much about, but doesn't seem to really cause a problem. The larger holes in the leaf are not due to the virus, but actually an insect, and which one I couldn't tell you. There's a lot of different insects by midsummer that'll feed on hackberries. A little earlier, June bugs were feeding on them, and people didn't notice them because they feed at night, and they'll leave fairly large holes like that. But my guess is that, like, most of the damage is done, and frankly, it's not hurting the plant.
Okay. The other one was quaking aspen.
Yeah.
The browning leaves.
Browning leaves and a little bit of the blackening twigs and that. This is a Ventura leaf blight. It's very closely related to apple scab and that. So it's, again, one of these general leaf diseases we're seeing more of this year because of, particularly in Brookings, where the faucet has not shut off since early May. The tree's fine. I mean, the thing to look for, everybody, is right now look at the buds. If the buds are soft and plump, that's fine. It's all set for next year. So don't be worried. These leaves are still photosynthesizing. Next year the plant will come out just fine.
All right, good. Thank you, and thank you for sending those samples in. Well, this Friday, if you don't have anything on your calendar, you may really want to consider this particular event because it is the 22nd annual McCrory Gardens Party in Brookings, South Dakota. Now, recently, Gardenline visited with the director of McCrory Gardens and extension horticulturalist David Graper about what can be seen, sampled, or savored at the garden. Here is a glimpse at a few of McCrory Gardens' features.
I want to invite you to the annual McCrory Garden Party at McCrory Gardens on the east side of Brookings, where there are many places to go and stroll around and explore while listening to jazz band Murph and Friends. And of course, there's going to be free SDSU ice cream. Lots of new things to see and explore. Wonderful flowering plants scattered throughout the gardens. Beautiful areas like the Annie Hansen Garden, featuring quite a few zinnias this year, which are fantastic plants out in the sun garden. Strawbill House will be open for you to come in and see what's going on there. We'll have displays set up for our new Education and Visitor Center, which is in the planning process at this point. Of course, a lot of our friends, the butterflies and insects, will be around. We are going to spray for mosquitoes, so don't let the mosquitoes scare you off. We should be in pretty good shape. The weather should be nice. Again, lots of interesting plants to explore and enjoy at McCrory Gardens. Here we have some scenes from the perennial garden, really in vibrant color right now. Phlox, echinacea, a whole host of different kinds of perennials and even a few annuals thrown in. Really going to give you a wonderful place to go and stroll around, listen to the sound of the fountain in the background, and enjoy the perennial garden. Our shrub roses are in full bloom at this time also, so lots of roses to sniff as you wander around in the gardens. The All-America Trial Gardens is also in full bloom, featuring penstemon, an excellent perennial plant for you to try in your gardens. I'm not sure if these are going to be hardy for us here, but many penstemon scattered around McCrory, and you'll see some of the newer varieties available here. Also Gaillardia, another excellent perennial plant for use in gardens, featuring some creamy shaded ones here. And some Agastache, a plant that may not be hardy for us, but it does very well as a summer annual. Another interesting plant are the sun patience. Here we can see some growing along with some zinnias. The sun patience is a new heat and sun tolerant impatiens, a New Guinea impatient, where you can grow them in part shade to full sun. You can have interesting foliage color as well as flowers from all summer long up until a hard freeze. Again, so this is the garden party coming up this Friday. It's going to be in Brookings. We're going to be doing free tours in the afternoons, leaving from the information shelter. And then about 5:30 or so, we'll roll out the SDSU ice cream for you to come out, have a cone or two as you explore the gardens, meet with friends, see what we're doing as far as the gardens are concerned, and especially looking at some plans for our new Education and Visitor Center, which is going to be groundbreaking hopefully this fall. One last plant here, the chili, which is a ornamental pepper that works really great as an edging plant. Here you can see it being used in the garden. It's a safe plant to use around kids because it's not a hot pepper, but very interesting. So again, remember the garden party this Friday, 5:30 till dusk at McCrory Gardens.
Well, we really thank Dave for that information on the garden party that's coming up. And we have Rhoda, who's going to share just a few more details with us for that party.
I think Dave mentioned some of this, but there will be free tours from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So if you want to walk around the gardens with somebody who knows more about the plants, come early and take a look around. Be sure to bring your camera. It's always a good time. Chance to see some of the plants, some of the newer plants that are coming out, and maybe go back and ask your nursery for them. When you get home, bring a pen so you can write down some notes. And there's going to be 10 flavors of SDSU ice cream, so you've got to be able to find one in there that will be your favorite. And then there's music, and so bring your friends and just have a great time.
So tours, music, and ice cream. Boy,
that's right.
What more could you ask for?
And if you want to support McCrory Gardens, there's an organization called Friends of McCrory Gardens, and you'll have the opportunity to learn more about that as well.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Rhoda, for that. So now I think we'll get back to some of the samples that were sent to us electronically. And this will be graphics 5 and 6, and comes to us from Hot Springs. John? Ball. Our balsam poplar tree has worms and webs, mostly on just 2 branches. Although before the hard rain we had today, you could see more webs on the other parts of the tree. Do we cut off the involved branches, spray with something, or just let the worms feast and look forward to next year?
You know, I'd go with option 3. You could just let it go. The tree is going to be fine. We are getting some fall webworm already started, and that's most likely what it is. I've seen a little of that out in the hills already. The one thing not to do not cut off the branch. We got people, well, I'm going to cut off the branch. Well, you're taking off more tissue than the insects would do. If you really want to spray, there's almost any insecticide will take care of them. 7 or malathion will. But quite honestly, if there's a few out there at this time of year, I'm not all that concerned about it. So if they were even thinking, well, you know, should I do anything about it? No, the tree will be fine next year.
All right. This one comes from Oldham, and John, still for you here. Linden tree that they bought at a reputable nursery this spring and now has problems. It started with a few leaves earlier this summer, getting some brown spots on them and kind of curling. Now it has spread and I'm quite worried. It has been given plenty of water all summer. No problems with any of the other nearby plants. I sprayed it with dish soap solution. The leaves have really worsened just in the past few weeks.
You know, at this time of year, I start getting calls on browning and discolored linden leaves. I mean, it's almost an annual event. On some of these trees, the newly planted ones, you'll see it pop up even more. There's a number of minor leaf diseases that'll cause the browning. They also seem to suffer a lot from moisture stress by this time of year too, and a young tree that could be doing that. You know, without really looking at the sample, I can't tell you which is a factor. It wouldn't surprise me if both are, but let me just tell you this is a fairly common event, particularly on young trees. And as long as the buds are good, and that's what you want to go out and look. If the buds are soft and pliable, which I'm certainly are in this plant, then don't worry about it. There's not a spray you could do right now that's going to do a lick of good anyway. So just relax. It'll come back next year, and most likely you're not going to see as much of a problem. But still, with lindens, don't be surprised if every August you start finding some brown tint to the leaves, and some of them just fall a little prematurely.
All right. Thank you, John. Mike, and this will be graphic 7, 8, and 9. They're kind of weed related, and the first ones here are kind of unique ones. The first two pictures are a viney, yellowy, stringy thing. It is in the beets. Last year it was in the same spot. Can you tell me what it is and how to get rid of it?
Yeah, well, I can tell you what it is. It's actually a parasite. It's a parasitic plant. It doesn't have roots. It's just living off that host beet plant right now, living off the energy from that plant. So it's a parasite attached to the stems, maybe a little bit to the leaves. It's called dodder, D-O-D-D-E-R, dodder. Somewhat, you know, you'll see it pop up once in a while in South Dakota. So it does produce a seed like any other plant, and in fact the seed looks just like an alfalfa seed. So that seed could live in the soil for maybe even up to 20 years. And so it'll linger there, and when you plant the right host, tomatoes are a host, beets, there's a long list of host plants out there. It will emerge and attach to those hosts and thrive. So you got to rotate out. Off the top of my head, I can't think of non-host species. There's several hosts and there's several non-hosts. If a non-host is there, I think like maybe sweet corn would be a non-host, and it would germinate and die because it wouldn't have a host plant to attach to. But that might be a continuous problem for you in that spot. Like I say, those seed can live there for maybe 20 years. So you might have to rotate out of there, maybe sweet corn or something like that in that area for now. How do you get rid of it? Yeah, you just have to go through there with like a rake or something like that and just manually remove it. There's nothing you can really spray to get rid of it.
Now, you say manually remove it. In this case, you'd probably have to sacrifice the plants that it's attached to?
I don't think so. I mean, you might be able to just scrape it out, like say, with like a garden rake or something like that, as best you can. You know, so you still might be able to harvest the plants, yeah.
All right. Kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, very unique, yeah.
Graphic 9, and this is one that from the same individual. Crawls on the ground, what is it and how to get rid of it. And that's a common one that's showing up right now this time of year.
Yeah, it seems like I had some complaints also with this at Dakota Fest. This is a prostrate spurge. This one here, if you break the stem, it'll have a little white milky juice in it, which is typical of any of the spurge species. So it's an annual. Yeah, it emerges late. It thrives in the drier part of the summer. So another good reason to put a good mulch down in your garden early on to suppress some of those later emerging species. So prostrate spurge is the weed there. And I want to remind people too, speaking of Dakota Fest, I want to remind people to stop on out. Dakota Fest down in Mitchell, South Dakota. We have a weed booth there, Master Gardener booth there. So people have questions, they're in the area, stop out at Dakota Fest.
All right. They can bring their samples if they wish?
Bring their samples, and that's right.
Okay, good. This particular question comes from Rapid City. What is the best way to get rid of phylloxera in my Frontenac grapes?
With phylloxera, it's a little insect that causes almost like a nipple gall on a grape leaf. And if it's really bad, the leaf becomes almost all little ridges. A lot of times we don't actually need to control it. Phylloxera tends to come in fairly late in the season. And if it's after, about end of June or so, early July is when it usually goes to the crawler stage and infects. lot of those later leaves we actually don't need. In fact, we do a lot of summer pruning to remove some leaves if your plants are vigorous. And in those cases, the phylloxera actually is almost our friend because it helps restrict growth. It really isn't that much of an issue. Now, if you've got it really bad, give me a call at the West River Ag Center, and I'll talk to you about some possible controls. It's real difficult to control because you have to get the crawler stage, and that's a short period around bloom time. So, and chemicals are fairly restricted, and they just took one back off the market. So give me a call, but for homeowners, I really wouldn't recommend doing anything. You can take off some of the infected leaves if you want, but again, it's kind of like the webworms, you know. So don't sweat it. It's really not hurting the plant that much.
Okay, so it's not that devastating if they...
No, it's not. You hear phylloxera in the grape industry and how it devastates the grape industry. Well, that's our California grapes where it goes down to the roots and destroys the roots. Our roots on the type that we can grow are resistant to it, so it's just the foliage type that we have, so it's not a big issue.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Rhoda. Tea roses. When do you stop fertilizing tea roses? Who wants that one?
Well, I would have.
Tim?
I mean, to me, it's now you shouldn't be. I mean, that's a spring thing. We don't want that continuing to grow much longer. So.
All right. Back to you, Mike. Bittersweet nightshade. It's in the shrubs and hedges. How do I get rid of that?
Yeah, bittersweet nightshade is a perennial, unlike the wild cucumber we talked about, which is an annual. So this one's a perennial, so you have to go in and pull out the roots. Fortunately, bittersweet nightshade is fairly easy to pull out, even though it is a perennial. But you're going to want to do it. It looks fairly pretty. It's a nice purple flower, a bright red berry. It's going to be tempting to leave it there, but don't, because it's very prolific, and soon you'll have bittersweet nightshade all around your house. So just reach in under those bushes and just pull it out. You can even take a shovel and just kind of sever it even down there at the root, and that'll do it. It doesn't take too long. It just takes a little time, and you get them under control.
Okay, John, and Mike on this one. Buckthorn, how do I get rid of it? And they have pull it, question mark, spray it, question mark. But if they suggest, yes. if they say pull it, it must not be too big. Maybe it's more simple.
I'll cut it.
Yeah, they can cut it, but you're not going to pull it very easily.
Pick up maybe.
Yeah, one way you can do it, and it does take time, but it was thick in the shoulder belt I had, and I went out in the winter and just cut it to the ground. Now, it will sprout back then, but all I did was cut the sprouts, put grass in there, because, I mean, it's a mature shoulder belt, and then mowed it, and they're gone within a couple of years. I mean, and I didn't spray anything. You can spray, but if they're willing to just go out there and cut, and it comes up, cut it again, you can exhaust the reserves and you'll kill it.
Okay.
Or you could spray the regrowth as it comes up with a broadleaf type herbicide. Probably the most typical thing a person might do is cut it, and then you could treat those cut stumps with a concentrated solution of Roundup, maybe like a 50% solution of glyphosate or Roundup might do it. There are some bark stem sprays you can get as well, some brush type herbicides for that. But yeah, cut it, and if you want to prevent some of that regrowth, treat the top with Roundup. So
there is some stump killer type products that can be sprayed
Garlon is one that you could spray right on the base of the stem. Garlon is just fine in a shelter belt as long as you follow
John
label
is cringing
precautions.
on that one.
Well, that's because nobody follows label directions. They figure they got a bottle, they got a stump, let's use it up.
Yeah.
Garlon is safe.
So
I can show you a picture. Next time, we'll look at some pictures.
Make sure they follow label directions.
We're going to get into a debate here.
We will.
Counterpoint.
Yep.
Garlon.
That's the commercial standard.
Yep.
How about those pullers that you see advertised for buckthorn now, where they've got a lever on them and they clamp onto the base of that trunk and lever the whole thing out?
It'd have to be some very small plants to do that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, most of the time people are running into problems with stumps that, I mean, this big.
Right.
And you could apply a product, like you say, around the base to kill it carefully.
A couple of different options here. So
right.
Make sure if they use the chemical that we follow label directions. John, earlier in the program, you promised that you were going to give some answers to our quiz.
Answer to the quiz.
An answer. We're at that point in the show where we'd like to have you give the answer.
All right. Well, hopefully they got the graphics too. And what we have here is the shrub that we showed. There we go. Beautiful. That was taken, by the way, at the Arboretum in Mobridge, which is just a delight. Visit it sometimes, please. But this is Nanking cherry, Prunus tomentosa. It is fruiting right now. and the fruit is mature. You can pull it, you can eat it, though it's very sour, but it's used a lot in preserves and that too. So Prunus tomentosa grows anywhere in the state except excessively wet soils, which of course is what we have in a lot of the area of the state this year. But a wonderful small fruit plant, to which we actually have some cultivars for. So good job if you got that right. A couple of weeks, I'm going to give you a real tough one.
Okay.
And the birds will love that fruit.
Yeah, you know, that's right. The ones I looked at this last weekend, the fruit was spectacular, as you could see, but it was netted. Because if you don't net it, you'll have happy birds. Yeah, good point.
Now, you're always talking, too, not only current growing season, but winter, how attractive they can be. Is this one of those that would be?
No. I mean, it looks like sticks.
Okay.
It's
fruit will be gone, leaves will be gone.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I mean, like Rhoda says, if you don't net it, I've had people say it's never fruited, but it has. They just never saw the fruit.
Okay. Rhoda, this is one from Hamlin, I think, or Harriet, as best I can read it here.
There.
But anyway, yeah. Anyway, what the question is on rhubarb. Can we still use rhubarb at this time of the year? Is it still safe to eat? So you may want to explain what parts are and are not. Still firm, never been sprayed, which I'm not sure what they'd spray it for. But
Well, you can harvest it this time of year and eat the stems. They may be kind of stringy, but you won't have a plant next year, because now we need to allow the plant to go ahead and put its strength back into the roots for next year. So if you remove leaves at this time, you're either going to have a very spindly plant next year, or it won't even make it through the winter. So you want to leave it alone starting about mid-July or so and let it build up its resources again.
all right. The next question we have is for you, Rhoda, here. When is the honeydew melons ripe? What are some of the signs or things to look for to indicate that if they're ripe? The follow-up question, not so much to the honeydew melons, but is when should you transplant perennials? In the fall, question mark, specifically coneflower is what they're asking about.
Okay.
So.
Okay. First of all, with melons, a lot of our melons, the cantaloupe type or muskmelon, honeydews, those, we actually look for what we call slip, and that's if you just tug gently at the stem and it comes off, then it's ripe. If it really wants to hang on, leave it for a few more days and come back. You know, if you watch it, you can also detect a color change too, but the slip is an easy way for beginners to look at. As far as coneflowers, transplanting either late in the fall or I should say mid-fall or early spring. A lot of the coneflowers can come back from root cuttings, so they're pretty easy to work with, actually.
All right. John, we had a viewer call back in on the raspberry one you're talking about, and you made the comment about producing on second-year wood.
No, that was, the autumn bliss will, but typically we only use the fall crop.
Okay. What they'd like to have you do is clarify what you mean by second-year wood.
All right. With raspberries, and Rhoda can jump in here too, we have our summer bearing, they produce the cane the first year, and then the second year that cane produces fruit. With our fall bearers, that cane that comes up the first year will produce fruit that fall, and then you'll also get another crop of fruit from that the second summer. With our fall bearings, most of us just take the fall fruit. The autumn bliss and autumn Britain come in about now and will fruit until frost, and then cut them to the ground. If you have a summer bearer, what you need to do then is to take out the fruiting canes, the ones that have already fruited this summer, cut all those out, and then what I like to see is thin the one-year-old canes to about 8 inches apart, so you got good air circulation to that too, and then you're done. But really, to me, the fall bearers are wonderful because you just go in there, cut them all.
Having just inherited a summer raspberry patch this year, I think fall bearing are a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
Coming back to you here, John, apple trees. The apples are covered with a black dust that rubs off, washes off. Any idea what it may be and how to prevent that?
Are we looking at fly speck here, or is that just
Sooty mold?
Sooty mold, yeah. Sooty mold to it, yeah. Just something you can wash off. I mean, that's really about all there is to it.
Got a lot of questions about that at Dakota
Yeah.
Fest today, too.
Been so wet. Man.
So that's something that no real treatment for?
No, other than just a little water.
Okay. And that comes from aphids, the sooty mold?
So, well, yeah, I mean, it's a
waste of
honeydew,
that,
and you get the city molds on it. Yeah.
Okay, all right, good. Well, thank you, panelists. And that's all the time we have for this evening. Just to let you know, Garden Line does repeat twice each week on South Dakota Public Broadcasting Channel 3, which is also known as the Create Channel. The encore broadcast can be seen Thursdays at 11 a.m. Central and Saturdays at 4 p.m. Central. Check your local listings to find SDPBE Digital Channel 3 where you live. Now time to wrap up, and thanks to our panel of experts, John Keycaper, Brookings County Extension Educator, Rhoda Burrows, Extension Horticulturalist, Mike Meckning, Extension Weed Specialist, and John Ball, Extension Forestry Specialist. Also special thanks to our phone volunteers, the Brookings Master Gardeners, and thanks to you for watching and calling in. Have a good evening and happy gardening.
This program is funded in part by Swiftel Communications.